Prologue. November 2046. Paris-Brooke Seabrook jumped violently as she felt a sharp dig in the ribs from the desk behind her. Ow! She turned to glare at the girl sitting there. It was like looking in the mirror in many ways. Baby. Lindsay Scarlett met the glare with a vigorous nodding of the head, and Paris realized that Lindsay had been trying to draw her attention back to the teacher. The whole class was staring at her, and the knowledge made Paris blush, crimson in embarrassment. That's quite enough, Lindsay, from the adult. She wasn't getting the hint. She never does. Lindsay replied calmly. That's because you never give me the chance to, before you're wanting to be the center of attention. Paris retorted. Off in a world of your own, Paris? The teacher inquired, but not in a tone of voice that made Paris think that she was really that interested. Yes, miss. I'm terribly sorry. Paris apologized. Well, if you could kindly keep your attention focused for the remaining 10 minutes of the lesson, rather than having your mind on your lunch already, I'd be very grateful. The teacher replied. Paris could have pointed out that she hadn't been thinking about food at all. That was the last thing on her mind. She had, in fact, been thinking that in January she, Lindsay, her older brother Alfie, and younger sister Phoebe would be starting at an American school. Her younger brother Zeke would be educated entirely in America. It was weird because she had never thought in a million years that her parents would split up. They had seemed so strong. Even less so had she thought that her father would abandon her pregnant mother. They were due to fly back to his native New York between Christmas and New Year. He had booked the flights, but had so far neglected to tell his parents. Her grandmother Lavinia would crow about the failure of her son's marriage. She had never liked her daughter-in-law. Their mother's parents were devastated. Their mother wasn't even contesting their father's right to whisk them out of the country, which struck Paris as extremely odd. One of their cousins lived in San Francisco most of the time, and no one saw nearly enough of Aria. She also thought her father's heart wasn't really in the move. She knew that her mother was the love of his life. He wasn't functioning well at all since the separation. He saw them at weekends, whenever his work schedule allowed. He was a doctor and occasional surgeon. He had met her mother, a nurse, when she had worked temporarily in New York. Then her mother had had to suddenly return to England, and her father had emigrated a month or so later, because her mother had been expecting Alfie. A fairy tale wedding had followed, and now it was all ending in spectacular disaster. But Paris thought that there was something wrong with this version of events. It was almost as if her father had issued the threat out of anger, and because of the lack of opposition from her mother, he was now obliged to go through with it. Maybe her mother knew how miserable he was without her and was waiting for him to realize that too. She was probably banking on him returning to her at some point. She would know he was reluctant to go back to the influence of his mother. Paris thought it was a rather dangerous game, and hoped that her mother knew what she was doing. The alternative was that Courtney Seabrook was actually past caring, which Paris didn't believe for a second. Only because you don't want to believe it, a nasty little voice inside her whispered. She tried her best to ignore it. The lunch bell, which in Paris's opinion couldn't come quickly enough, started to ring.